It began with a speech that echoed far beyond the walls of the hall where it was delivered. Former U.S. President Donald J. Trump, standing before a crowd of supporters, declared that the killings of Christians in Nigeria had reached a breaking point, one he claimed the United States could not ignore. The room erupted, but around the world, the statement sent ripples through governments, analysts, and communities who knew the complexities of Nigeria's conflicts. Trump spoke bluntly. He accused Nigerian authorities of failing to stop violent attacks against Christian communities in the northern and central regions of the country. If those attacks continued, he warned, the United States would stop all financial and military assistance to Nigeria. And then came a phrase that set the world on edge. The United States, he said, might go in guns a-blazing to protect Christian lives. In Washington, the remark immediately collided with uncertainty. Some supporters framed his words as moral clarity, a defense of religious freedom. Others saw something more dangerous, a threat of foreign military involvement in a country already burdened by layers of conflict. Nigeria quickly responded. In Abuja, officials pushed back with a tone that was careful yet firm. Nigeria's foreign minister, Yusuf Tuggar, rejected Trump's claims outright. He said that religious persecution was not sanctioned by the Nigerian state. Under the country's constitution, he noted, it would be impossible for the government to support such targeting. Nigeria was not, he argued, a place where the state made war on one faith or another. Violence existed, but its causes were broader, tangled in history, poverty, and regional tensions. Still, the words from the former American president landed with force. Trump was not simply criticizing, he was escalating. Reports circulated that he had instructed what he called the Department of War, a phrase that hasn't been used in the United States since World War II, to prepare for possible engagement if the situation worsened. Analysts debated whether this was literal or rhetorical, but the implication alone was enough to spark headlines across continents. The narrative of persecution in Nigeria is not new. For years, attacks by extremist groups such as Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province have devastated communities, particularly in the Northeast. Thousands have died and millions have been displaced. Churches have burned. Pastors have been kidnapped. But the violence has not been limited to Christians. Muslims, too, have suffered deep losses. Entire villages in Muslim-majority regions have been razed. Children have been taken. Families shattered. Experts have long warned that framing Nigerian violence as a one-sided religious war ignores the scale of suffering across the population. The roots of conflict are layered. Extremist ideology, land pressure, ethnic tension, dwindling resources, farmer-herder conflicts, banditry, and widespread poverty. Religion often intertwines, but rarely stands alone. That complexity seemed lost in Trump's remarks. His speech focused on the Christian communities that indeed have endured real trauma, but his narrative presented a stark division. Christians as victims, Muslims as aggressors. Nigerian officials, religious organizations, and security analysts moved quickly to contextualize. Violence in Nigeria was not a campaign of one faith against another, they insisted, but a multifaceted security crisis affecting all. Inside Nigeria, reactions were divided. Some Christian groups welcomed the attention, feeling that past appeals to the international community had been ignored. They believed that only external pressure could force meaningful action and reform. Others feared that Trump's comments could inflame tensions, deepen mistrust, and worsen the very violence they sought to end. Muslim leaders voiced concern, seeing the remarks as a dangerous oversimplification that could fuel Islamophobic narratives abroad and sow division at home. They affirmed that their communities had also been attacked by insurgent groups and criminal networks. Amid the uproar, analysts examined the geopolitical stakes. Nigeria is Africa's most populous country, a hub of regional influence, trade, and security cooperation. An American military intervention, if ever attempted, would be unprecedented. Even the threat of it was enough to strain diplomatic ties. The United States and Nigeria have long held security partnerships, especially around counterterrorism, intelligence sharing, and military training. Nigeria has also been a beneficiary of U.S. development aid. Trump's statement put all of that into question. Would aid truly be cut? Could a former president influence U.S. foreign policy from outside office? Would future policymakers adopt or reject such rhetoric? Nigeria's official response left no ambiguity. The government rejected the threat, calling it misinformed and provocative. It emphasized its continued fight against terrorism and called for collaboration, not threats. Meanwhile, global reaction unfolded. International religious freedom organizations weighed in, some supporting Trump's strong words, others preferring a diplomatic path. African Union officials stressed the importance of respecting national sovereignty. In homes across Nigeria, people reacted in quieter ways. Some families who had already endured the worst of extremist attacks simply wanted peace, no matter where it came from. Others worried that Trump's call could invite more violence, not less. The political theater in Washington felt far away, yet its consequences seemed dangerously close. Behind these public statements lay the human story. In villages in Borno State, where Boko Haram began its violent campaign more than a decade ago, survivors recounted their losses. They remembered the nights when militants arrived, without warning, carrying rifles, chanting, burning. They remembered the flight into the bush, the fires that lit the sky, the silence that replaced familiar voices. Whether Christian or Muslim, the pain carried the same weight. In Plateau State, where tensions between farmers, mostly Christian, and herders, many of them Muslim, have simmered for years, communities reflected on a conflict older than political speeches. Here, the land was both blessing and curse. Fields had fed generations, but now the soil itself felt contested, scarred by climate shifts, population growth, and mutual distrust. Against this backdrop, Trump's message resonated differently for Nigerians than for his American audience. To some, he was telling a partial truth. To others, an inflammatory distortion. To most, he was not the one who would live with the consequences. The Nigerian government emphasized that it was actively fighting extremists, deploying soldiers, negotiating with regional allies, and attempting reforms. But progress was uneven. Corruption, limited resources, and difficult terrain slowed efforts. In some places, communities organized their own defense, forming vigilante groups that sometimes brought protection and sometimes more chaos. As weeks passed, Trump's remarks continued to circulate online. Commentators debated. Interview panels dissected the meaning. Would this spark new pressure on Nigeria to rethink its strategy? Would it strain relations with Washington? Or would it fade into the noise of global rhetoric? In the United States, the issue also became political terrain. Some hailed Trump as a defender of religious freedom. Others condemned his words as reckless, oversimplifying a crisis and risking destabilization. Members of the Nigerian diaspora expressed mixed feelings. Many wanted stronger action to stop violence, but they feared that foreign intervention could worsen internal divisions or undermine Nigeria's sovereignty. Through all the debate, the central truth remained: Nigeria's violence is real. The suffering is real. Families from all faiths have been torn apart. The call for help, recognition, and support is not new, but how that support arrives matters. Diplomats urge collaborative solutions, development programs, intelligence sharing, conflict resolution initiatives, and strengthened local governance. Others argued that only a strong security response could dismantle powerful extremist groups. Trump's statement, dramatic, polarizing, forced the world to look again at Nigeria's tragedy. It reopened difficult questions. Who is responsible for protecting vulnerable communities? How should the world respond to religious violence? When does help become intrusion? And most of all, what path leads to peace, not more bloodshed? Whether the United States would ultimately act remained unclear, but the conversation shifted. Nigeria, already navigating delicate internal tensions, now faced new international pressure. And somewhere in the countryside, where fear and survival walked side by side, the people waited for action, for answers, for tomorrow unlike today.